Hello and welcome to the video tutorials on xaitMap Creator 2.5. In this fourth video tutorial, we will learn how to use non-walkable geometry and blocking to get rid of unwanted parts of the nav mesh. In the third video tutorial, we will learn how to use spawn points to remove unreachable parts of the nav mesh. In this tutorial, we will learn how to use non-walkable geometry to effectively cut holes in the nav mesh. This feature allows us to get rid of unwanted parts of the nav mesh that should not be included for design reasons. Let's check out an example. Here you see an irregular shaped room, and what we're going to do is cut out a triangular shaped area in the middle of that room that should not be part of the nav mesh. The reason for this is that there could be some complex particle effect in that spot, and the game designer doesn't want NPCs to move through that area. To cut out that part, we import a non-walkable geometry that is exported from the level editor as any other geometry would be, and imported into xaitMap Creator. This triangular area is then flagged as being non-walkable, and a nav mesh is generated. Because of those edges that separate the triangular area from the rest of the room, we need to create separate nav mesh areas for each of them. There will be an outer part consisting of these areas connected by those three edges, and there will be a completely unconnected part in the inner area of the room. So let's have a look at the model in 3D. We have a room modeled here as a plane on the floor, and we have the unreachable part of the room modeled in this 3D triangle here. What we're going to do now, in order to get it through xaitMap Creator, is to export them as two separate geometries. So first, I select this floor plan, then choose Export Selection, Export to My Binary, and export this as the walkable part of this geometry. Now I select the 3D triangle and choose Export Selection again, Export to My Binary, and then export this as the non-walkable part of the geometry. Now we have two separate files generated, one containing the floor plan that is walkable, and the other containing the non-walkable blocking part. I'll now switch over to xaitMap Creator to open a project. To save some time, I've pre-created a project called Tutorial 4 that contains all the exported geometry. You can see here in the static geometry folder there are two geometries. There is the walkable part, which is our floor plan, and the non-walkable part, which is here. To demonstrate what would happen normally, I will generate a nav mesh without using any of the non-walkable features. I do this by choosing the Run Nav Mesh button, and instantly xaitMap Creator generates a nav mesh. As you can see, there are two parts to this nav mesh, one covering the floor plan and the second covering the top of the triangular structure. This is the expected behavior of xaitMap Creator, which does not know yet that certain parts of the geometry are not walkable. I change this behavior by selecting the non-walkable geometry and down in the Property tabs, changing the walkable tab from true to false. I regenerate the nav mesh by clicking on the Build button again, and instantly, xaitMap Creator stops creating any nav meshes on top of this geometry. One more thing to notice is that the non-walkable geometry only acts as blocking areas, not volumetrically. So part of the nav mesh will be built within this triangular structure. Because the structure is closed, this inner part will be unconnected to any of the nav mesh areas outside, but it will still be built. If you want to get rid of these inner areas, you will need to use spawn points. If you place a spawn point outside the non-walkable geometry and turn on the usage of spawn points, the inner area will be discarded in the build step because it is not reachable. So, to demonstrate this, let's go back to xaitMap Creator. The first thing I do is select our non-walkable geometry here, and in the Properties window, switch the visibility to false. This allows us to see what is happening inside the 3D triangular area, and we can see here that there is still a part of the nav mesh that is being built. To get rid of this, I place a spawn point outside of the non-walkable geometry. I add a spawn point here, and in our nav mesh build, I switch the Use Spawn Points tab to True. If you'd like to know more about using spawn points, have a look at video tutorial 3. What I do now is regenerate the nav mesh, and as you can see, the unreachable part of the inside of the triangle has been removed. So now that we understand how to use non-walkable geometry, let's take a look at blockings. The first thing I need to do is remove the non-walkable geometry from my build step. I click on the non-walkable geometry here in the build and remove it. I've now removed the link between the build and the non-walkable geometry. The non-walkable geometry is still available in the project, it just won't be included in the build step. When I click on the build button, you can see that the non-walkable geometry is no longer used. In doing all of this, we've noticed that using non-walkable geometry has one disadvantage. Whenever I want to exclude a different part from a nav mesh, I must first go through a 3D modeler and generate the geometry to exclude. If I want to achieve something faster, I can use a blocked area. Say for example that I want to exclude this part here from our nav mesh. I can do so without using a 3D modeler program. What I do is right-click inside the geometry and choose Add Blocked Area. This gives me a blocking cube indicated in red here. What's nice is that I can manipulate this block right inside of xaitMap Creator. I can select this cube and from the context menu choose Scale. This gives me a couple of scale handles that I can use to position the blocked area however I want to. Let's say I want to go that far and scale it to the right here. Let's do some more scaling in this direction. Okay, nice. Now that I have defined my blocked area, I regenerate the nav mesh again, and as we can see, it works exactly the same as non-walkable geometry, where all of the nav mesh within this volume is discarded. Okay, let me briefly sum up what we've learned in video tutorial number 4. In order to exclude parts from a nav mesh, we can use either non-walkable geometry or blockings. The difference is that non-walkable geometry can have arbitrary shape and is exported from a 3D modeler program. Blockings, on the other hand, always have cubic shape and can be generated and manipulated inside of xaitMap Creator 2.5. Thanks again for listening.